Hello everybody, how are you doing? This is Rob of Rule of Two Review. Welcome back to the channel. And today I want to talk about the back half of the year for Nintendo and what surprises we might still see. So we're now only 1 week into July of 2022, which means we're right at the halfway mark for the year. And yes, it feels crazy to already be halfway through 2022, but that's just how things go. I mean, I can't speak for you guys, but for me, I feel like New Year's was like, I don't know, a month ago, 3-4 weeks ago. And here we are halfway through the year. My birthday is next week. And every time we come to my birthday, I'm like, yep, the year's halfway over because that's when my birthday happens, the middle of July, the middle of the year. And it's always just such a wild thing to realize once we've actually made it to this point. Now, when we look at what's happening in gaming, analyzing the year halfway through is always very interesting because we have the first half to consider and see what we've been enjoying throughout the year, and then we also get to look forward for what's going to happen in the back half of the year. And of course, as much as I love and play and game on everything, I do always focus on Nintendo. They're my favorite company. That's what we talk about for the most part here on the channel. And Nintendo has had a decent year for the first half, and in fact, one of my favorite games I've played this year, to my surprise, has been Kirby and the Forgotten Lands. And I'm not really a big Kirby fan, but I think that game is just absolutely fantastic. I am so glad I took a gamble on it and picked it up. And as a platforming superfan, it just satisfied everything I wanted out of that kind of game. And I really, really loved it. So it's not my favorite game I've played this year, but it's definitely one of my favorite games, a first-party Nintendo game. And, you know, there's been a couple of other smatterings of things on the Switch that has been okay, some more divisive than others. I'm looking at you, Mario Strikers, but in general, it's been a slow year for all companies. I mean, Horizon was a big game for PlayStation, Kirby was the big game for Nintendo. A couple of big third-party games, Elden Ring and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, I mean, huge games. Elden Ring is definitely my game of the year so far. So, what I'm getting at is the first half of the year for all of gaming has been pretty good. Nintendo has been okay, but we're also waiting on some other bigger things from Nintendo. And the back half of the year for Nintendo is shaping up to be a little bit strange in the sense that there is a couple of huge, really big and really exciting titles coming out. But it also, in a weird way, feels like it's missing something as well, right? It's kind of hard for me to put my finger on exactly what it is, but I've seen other people share the same sentiment, so I don't think that I'm alone. And so I want to discuss what we know is coming for Nintendo and the things that maybe are missing that we want to see from Nintendo, and maybe even predict if we might see a couple of surprises still. Of course, don't forget, I am hoping to hit 20,000 subscribers in the next year. I am closing in on that gap every single day, less than 2,000 subscribers away. I upload every single week and I talk about all things Nintendo and all things gaming, so as you watch this video, if you like what I'm doing and what you hear, then I hope you consider subscribing to the channel. So let's quickly run down what we know is happening in the back half of the year for Nintendo, because to my count, there's actually 4 significant titles. So as much as we can talk about the back half feeling strange or maybe not that packed of games for Nintendo, it's kind of not really true because there are 4 significant games. The one coming up most quickly, and actually the one I am most excited about, is Xenoblade Chronicles 3. I mean, I am not a JRPG fan, as you guys hear me say all the time, but boy, do I love the Xenoblade games, and Xenoblade Chronicles 3 looks to potentially even maybe be the best Xenoblade game, which will be a tall order because I think the first Xenoblade and X are just both so fantastic. But Chronicles 3 really could be that good. The Nintendo Direct presentation on the game was very exciting. I love what they seem to be doing with it. For my simpleton brain, it does look a little bit complex, and I've said this, so I'm a little bit worried as somebody who's not attuned to the more complicated kind of JRPGs. This might be the one that goes way over my head, but I'm still excited to give it a shot. I love these games. And I do think I'm going to love it. Now, that releases at the end of the month. I believe it's July 29th, so it's like 2 or 3 weeks away. It's a huge deal. I think the game is going to, smash up 1.5 million sales before the end of the year, maybe even 2 million. I think it's going to be a big hit and a very popular game. So that's coming up right away. Not too long after that, Splatoon 3, I think, is going to be the next really big game in September. And I'm a huge Splatoon fan. I don't really love a whole lot of multiplayer games nowadays, but the Splatoon games, to me, are just awesome. I would also expect a direct presentation that focuses on Splatoon, maybe 10 or 15 minutes or so, similar to what they did with Xenoblade, because Splatoon has become one of Nintendo's biggest new IPs and new franchises of the past 10 years. The first one did spectacular on the Wii U. Splatoon 2 has done even better on the Switch, and they're both great games for what they are. And I really hope they dial everything up to 11 for Splatoon 3. And I expect they will. I'm sure it's going to be the best of the games so far. And I'll be especially excited if the single-player component is expanded on even more, you know. So I'm really excited to see what they're going to do there. That happens in September. So, you know, we've got a gap in August. In July, there's Xenoblade. August, so far, no big notable game. Probably some small indie games, whatever, but no big notable exclusive game. Then in September, we come back with Splatoon 3. And then in October, we have Mario plus Rabbids 2, which is, what is it called? Sparks of Hope. And, you know, I mean, I'm not normally a big fan of these kinds of games, but I did think the original game was really good and fun. I do own it. I think it's a really cool game for what it is. And so I think that the sequel is going to be just as good, if not better. So it is a game I'm excited to play, and I'm sure that I'm going to really enjoy it. And I think it will also be a really big hit. And then, of course, the month after that comes probably the biggest game of the holiday, which is going to be the new Pokemon game, or Pokemon games, I should say. And I don't really have much to add here because I don't play or enjoy Pokemon, as many of you guys may know. But it's one of the most popular franchises on planet Earth, and every new release, no matter how divisive it is, and no matter how much half of the Pokemon fan base is going to complain and whine about it, it's still going to sell like crazy. And, you know, half of the people may hate it, but the other half of the people are going to love it. And I honestly think everyone's going to buy it. That's what happens with every Pokemon game. Half the fan base may complain about it, but that same half that complains still ends up buying it. And you can't tell me I'm wrong, because look at the sales of every Pokemon game. It smashes records and sells like 15 to 25 million copies every single time. Even the weird one-off games like the Let's Go Pokemon games, or like Arceus, and I know that's actually a very good game for Pokemon fans. You know, even the spin-off games do incredibly well, and they just do gangbuster numbers. So, you know, half of you guys are going to hate and complain about these Pokemon games, but you're all going to buy it. So, what do we have? In July, we've got Xenoblade. August, so far, we have nothing. September, we have Splatoon. October, we have Mario and Rabbids. And then in November, we've got Pokemon. So that's 4 huge releases that will all sell multi-million units, you know, to varying degrees. And so that's what we already have confirmed for the back half of the Switch's year. And you can't deny that that's a really strong, solid lineup. Of course, we have to touch briefly on Zelda because, you know, up until a couple of months ago, we were expecting Zelda Breath of the Wild 2 to be a 2022 title. That's what they told us last year. And as we know, it did unfortunately get pushed back to spring next year. And that's a whole different conversation I don't want to spend too much time going in. I've mentioned it on other videos that I think it might get delayed again until holiday next year, and there's the whole other conversation on if it's meant to launch with some kind of new Switch hardware, maybe bring Nintendo into the next generation and be a cross-gen thing. And I think that all of that is very likely going to happen, but that's not what this conversation's about. The conversation is about the fact that originally Zelda was going to be the big tentpole holiday game, and it got pushed back. So right now, it's technically Pokemon as the big tentpole holiday game. But Breath of the Wild 2 kind of becomes a good segue into what other things we might expect as potential surprises to release in the back half of the year for the Nintendo Switch. Things that we don't currently have confirmed, but still have time to be announced and also release before the year is over. And Breath of the Wild 2 segues us into the Zelda port kind of conversation that I even talked about in one of my more recent videos, and everyone's been talking about for like the last 2 years anyway. And it's whether or not we're going to see games like Wind Waker or Twilight Princess HD get ported from the Wii U over to the Switch. And a lot of people think that may happen. Some people say that they've heard rumors it's going to happen. Other people talk about Ocarina of Time 3D or Majora's Mask 3D. Some people talk about the Oracle games. You know, long story short, some sort of remade HD remasters or remakes or ports of prior Zelda games to release this year to fill in the gap since Breath of the Wild 2 got delayed. We've already had Skyward Sword HD come out on the Switch. Why wouldn't they do the same with Wind Waker or Twilight Princess? Release them as a double pack, release them as cheap downloads only, you know, like on the eShop, or just do something with those games. It makes a ton of sense. I definitely think that Nintendo has been looking at it and considering it for a while. If we don't have Zelda Breath of the Wild 2 this year, it's just guaranteed gangbuster money that Nintendo would make if they release one or both of those games in HD on the Switch. And as we've all talked about, the ideal structure is to make an HD double pack for $60 of Wind Waker and Twilight Princess together. Does it get complicated because of Skyward Sword HD being released by itself for $60? Yeah, it does. And so it would just depend on what Nintendo might choose to do to Wind Waker and Twilight Princess to like justify the value of selling them both for $60, whereas Skyward Sword was itself $60 alone. I don't know. I don't want to spend too much time breaking that down. It's just, it is what it is. We understand that there's a pricing conversation to have, but if we separate ourselves from the pricing conversation and just look at whether or not it makes sense for Nintendo to release these games, it does. It just simply does. And I don't know that it's going to happen, but I just think that the window is open for them to maybe do that, so that could be something that they still surprise us with this year. Another game that we have to talk about, and I know it keeps coming up, but we can't avoid it because it's still a mystery, and it's Bayonetta 3, man. We need an update on that game. We need a new trailer showing off a ton more actual gameplay, and we definitely need a date. It's still currently slated for 2022, right? And so here we are at the halfway point of the year. We've got 4 big releases in July, August, September, and October. In July, September, October, and November. We no longer have Zelda as 2022. Bayonetta 3 has been a very long time coming, and we did get a trailer last year. They're still telling us 2022. Does it make sense for them to squeeze Bayonetta 3 in the back half of the year? I think it could make sense, and I sure as heck want it. Because, honestly, like, Pokemon in November doesn't do much for me. I'm not going to even buy or play those games. I'm obviously getting Xenoblade and Splatoon. I'm almost for sure going to get Mario plus Rabbids. I'm a little bit hesitant on it, but I more than likely will give in and pick it up at the time. And so, what do we do with Bayonetta? I mean, I guess you could argue it could have been the big August release, but we're so close to August now that I feel like they would want more time to prepare for it. I could see Bayonetta being a perfect October game, or, I said this recently, it could actually be a good December game. We can't forget, they've released multiple Xenoblade games in December, and they released Smash Bros. Ultimate in December. So Nintendo has found a way to release huge titles that sell extremely well in the month of December. So what if Bayonetta 3 is going to be slotted in December? If they want to commit to 2022, I think there's a great chance that happens. Or they also make it an October release. We can't forget, Bayonetta 2 on the Wii U released in October. So even though Mario plus Rabbids is October, they could maybe do Bayonetta 3 like in the first week of October, right? I mean, Metroid Dread was the first week of October last year, so that's a great slot for a big exclusive game. And so my whole theory here with Bayonetta 3 is that if they made it October or December, we still have time for them to announce and confirm that it comes out this year, announce it for one of those months, give us a new big trailer and blow the doors open on the gameplay, do that before the end of like August, I would say, and I think you're giving yourself enough time to promote it as a big October, November, or December game. And so that brings us to the last and biggest and most exciting possibility to me, and of course, you guys knew I had to touch on this. The only other remaining surprise game I could see from Nintendo releasing in 2022 that they haven't yet confirmed is, of course, this Metroid Prime remake, remaster trilogy thing, right? Whatever this monstrous thing turns out to be, I think that there is still a great chance that that is going to happen. I am somebody that is believing that there is a plan to release some sort of Metroid Prime re-release or port on the Switch. Again, whether it's the Trilogy HD or the Prime 1 complete remake, as Jeff Grubb talked about recently, and Emily Rogers has as well. I think there's some truth to that, you guys. If I was going to put money on it, I think that we're going to see some something like this happening this year. Trilogy HD, Prime Remake, happening in 2022, maybe in like, October or November. I think it's going to happen, you guys. It's just the perfect surprise and the perfect game. And Jeff Grubb himself even mentioned it, and I covered it on that video as well, that they have an opportunity to celebrate the 20th anniversary of Metroid Prime, because 2022 is the 20th anniversary. That game came out in 2002. And as you all know, it's my favorite video game ever made. And so giving us the complete remake or even the Trilogy HD pack, whatever they do, releasing some kind of Metroid Prime title to celebrate the 20th anniversary of that series and of that first game, it just makes too much sense, man. And we've been talking about the Prime trilogy on the Switch for like 4 or 5 years. We've heard things privately and publicly that Nintendo was planning on it, and plans changed, and Prime 4 getting, restarted might have changed their plans, and all these different things. And now we find ourselves in the 20th anniversary year of the first game. So with all of the hubbub and conversation around these games, why wouldn't Nintendo do something like this? Just like with Bayonetta, there's still time for Nintendo to announce and confirm that they're going to do something like this, because these are just already made games they would just be remastering or remaking to release on the Switch. So there's just time for them to do it and still make that an August, September, October, November, or December release. It's just something I think is going to happen. And so outside of all these options, I just don't know what else Nintendo might be considering for the back half of the year. Maybe none of these surprises happen. Maybe the 4 big games we know about is all that we can expect. And if so, I mean, that's ultimately still fine. It's a pretty solid lineup, man. You can't deny. There's more exclusives coming out on the Switch in the back half of the year than there is for Xbox or PlayStation, right? At least that I can think of. We have God of War on PlayStation, which is going to be incredible and probably my game of the year. But other than that, I mean, I don't know. Am I forgetting something? Xbox delayed all their games to next year. PlayStation has God of War, and I think that's it. But the Switch has 4 exclusive big titles coming out on it. Like, you can't deny the quality of that lineup for the back half of the year. And if you add in a Bayonetta, a Zelda, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess thing, or a Metroid Prime Trilogy remaster, if you add those in, then it's even better. So I can't really think of any other possible surprises at this point that Nintendo could give us, but I want to hear what you guys think. Do you think the things that I discussed make sense? Do you think that Nintendo has no more surprises for the rest of the year? Or is there a surprise you think they could do that I didn't even think about? Whatever you think, talk about it below. And with that, this video is a wrap. Thanks, of course, as always, for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Rule of 2 Review, and I will catch you next time on another video. Bye-bye.